But we've got to start with Erik ten Hag getting sacked as Manchester United manager. Breaking news, nonetheless, pretty much on Not Another Sports Pod.
Like, no one, as you say, will remember your name if you go out there and win a Balon d'Or, in the same way that if you win a World Cup, people will recite that starting 11 forever in this country.
Botafogo 5, Peñarol, who've won the competition 5 times, 0. And Atlético Mineiro 3, River Plate of Argentina, who've won the competition 4 times, 0. All right, nice one, Ollie. 19?
19.
Hello and welcome along to episode number 19 of Not Another Sports Pod with myself, David, and Mr. Oliver Wilson. And we both got caps on today, and potentially they represent us quite nicely, Ollie, for our YouTube viewers. We've got the home of golf, Mr. Wilson, and Windsor is
offline.
Offline. So there we go.
Is that a golf hat? As in, you know, you're not the best golfer I'm taking, and therefore you're hitting it offline? Or is this, is this like a don't interact with me sort of cap? Okay.
This is the Zen digital detox. So unplug, detach from reality, turn it all off, screens are hell, offline.
So the man who I've heard say on many an occasion, man, I need to up my social media game, get more plugged into that side of things, is also now advertising himself as the man who is not online at all. Okay. All right.
So actually, Ollie, it's a cap. It's merchandise from my friend Hector, who has a business called Unplugged Rest, and they have cabins in the countryside, and one of their things is offline. So yeah, check that out if you want, guys. Our first, not sponsored, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, how much? Is that a free cap? Is there any more merch coming here?
Certainly no free. No, mate, you got to support your mates' businesses by buying the merch retail price. Let's dive in, Ollie. So much to get through today. I want to talk title race. I want to talk Trent wanting the Balon d'Or. I want to talk Jose Mourinho's fall from grace. I want to talk Diego Forlán becoming a professional tennis player. But we've got to start with Erik ten Hag getting sacked as Manchester United manager. Breaking news, nonetheless, pretty much on Not Another Sports Pods. Look, Ollie, I just want to read out the list of managers that have managed Manchester United since Sir Alex Ferguson left, right? In 2013. David Moyes, Ryan Giggs, caretaker. Van Gaal, Mourinho. Solskjaer, Carrick, caretaker. Ralf Rangnick, Ten Hag, now Ruud van Nistelrooy, caretaker. They're not all crap managers, right? Some of them are probably really good. Some of them are definitely really good because we've seen it in terms of historically what they've won at different football clubs. So, is the problem the manager? And what exactly the Manchester United thinks is going to happen? You've got rid of a coach who's won back-to-back trophies in back-to-back seasons. And now you've got Ruud van Nistelrooy because he was a striker at the club. So maybe that will be okay. Do you know what I mean? Okay, you got rid of Ten Hag. Now what? What are you going to do? I don't... What's the method in this? It's late October. You had the whole summer to get rid of him when you got rid of everyone else. It's just okay, what next? It's an odd one for me. It's an odd one.
We already touched on the fact that Ten Hag is guiding the ship probably as well as he can. And look, obviously in these sorts of incidents, I noticed straight away this afternoon, the Daily Mail's running a piece, Ten Hag lost the dressing room, the players wouldn't react to him, felt there was a change was needed at this club. And it's but you can think that any time stuff goes bad. And I'm not even saying that it's gone terribly disastrous. Obviously, United invested a hell of a lot of money this summer. They're not reaping the rewards as they would certainly like to when you consider their position in the Premier League table. But it's so easy. It's so synonymous of modern-day culture, and particularly modern-day sporting culture, and maybe in a large part just personal interaction, society as a whole of, it's not really working. Move on. Get a new thing. I'm not fussed about this now. That doesn't work. It takes time for anything to work, and it takes time to solve problems that are as complex as Manchester United Football Club right now. Because it's painfully obvious when you think about the number of managers that you've just touched on, the level of some of those managers that you've just touched on, who come into that club, and the failure continues and continues to happen, and nobody seems to be... Manchester United fans seemingly haven't been happy since Sir Alex Ferguson. And they had a joyous, elated period under Sir Alex. Obviously, the greatest time that Manchester United fans will ever have probably in the history of that club. That's never going to be replicated. It's not going to be replicated easily. And continually being unhappy and putting negative attitude around the club as a whole has just meant United as a club seem like it's just a horrible place to be and a horrible place to go. And I don't think you fix that by just jumping ship time and time and time again, particularly when you've got a manager who's just brought you, as you touched on there, two pieces of silverware in the last 2 years. It's very similar to like the West Ham thing with David Moyes. Hammers fans were just so awful about Moyes at the end of his time with West Ham. And we've got a mutual friend who's a West Ham fan who was saying the other day to me that he went back the other night.
The great Mr. Mitchell?
No, Mr. Andy Bishop, Sky Sports commentator. He went back
another great friend
the other night and rewatched the UEFA Europa Conference League final just because of how good that night was. And Hammers fans will never have it probably that good again for a long period of time. And yet Moyes, when he was departed, was like vilified. And the same thing will happen with Ten Hag. It's like, well, you might have a manager that comes in now. If it's Ruud van Nistelrooy, who's the favourite to take over on a full-time basis, what does Ruud van Nistelrooy know about managing? Like, he's had a very brief spell, I think, in charge of PSV. But aside from that, and this is one of the biggest clubs on the planet that you're just giving it to a guy who, well, he might be all right. I mean, Gareth Southgate was being kind of bandied about as a manager.
Oh, my goodness.
Does Gareth Southgate have that level of grit to handle a Manchester United job? It works with England because you're in and out of the spotlight a bit, and Southgate gets his time, and he obviously worked on his whole demeanour as a manager in general and created a very good media personality for himself. He invited the media in a lot. He opened up that relationship. You don't really get to do that at Manchester United. You're not going to be having these kind of week-long, oh, come on, guys, meet the players, let's have a chat, it's all relaxed, we've got a Nations League game coming up. This is like, you go in and you win and you win and you win. Southgate doesn't, to me, appear to be built for that sort of thing.
We're going to miss Ten Hag, Ollie, aren't we? I love the narrative around him. I love that he was on the lifeboat. You know, we mentioned the Titanic, and I love that he was so bullish in press conferences, and I loved what he did after the FA Cup final at the back end of last year, and he was just like, look, I win trophies, that's what I do. It was so bullish. You've got to back yourself. So I think the Premier League will miss him. I think he was... Look, is Ten Hag the man to restore Manchester United to former glories? Obviously not. But equally, I think it's a harsh one. There's no obvious replacement, as you say. Go on, Ollie, yeah.
I don't think anybody is the man to restore Manchester United to former glories because it's out of a football manager's power to be able to create a positive atmosphere around that team. You see it in so many other sports that a negative, and it gets described maybe a little bit over the top, but a cancerous attitude in not just a locker room, but in a whole sports team, from top to bottom, from the front desk to the receptionist to everything else, can creep in, and it's so difficult to get out. And that's what I think is at Manchester United right now. And any manager that goes in there is almost sitting with the sword of Damocles straight over their head in such a poor environment, with the lack of facilities, the problems with the stadium, the fact that there are plenty of fans that remember the good old days and are so continually unhappy right now. And then you've got a dressing room that apparently hasn't been able to get on with a manager. Some of the great managers of all time that have walked through those doors for the last 10 years. So, I mean, I don't think there is a football manager that is good enough to turn around everything that's at Manchester United. It's a top-to-bottom renovation, so to speak. It's a fixer-upper.
Say again?
It's a fixer-upper. It's the most expensive fixer-upper you'll ever buy.
By the way, I just love... We've mentioned this before, not another sports one, but I love the fact because Wilson's refurbing his house. Like, the amount of naughty little property refurb references that have snuck into this podcast over 19 episodes is just absolutely spectacular. I want to wrap up the Ten Hag conversation because there's so much to talk about. So I want a one-word answer, Ollie. Let's pretend neither of us are, but let's pretend you're a Man United fan and you understand the football club, and I'm going to give you 10 names, and you tell me which one should take over next, okay? Van Nistelrooy, Xavi, Southgate, Thomas Frank, Nagelsmann, Ruben Amorim, the lad at Sporting, Graham Potter, Zidane, Eddie Howe, Max Allegri, or Marco Silva. Might not be 10 there. But give me one word.
I'd take Allegri.
He's the winner.
Yeah.
Right, title race.
Oh, you're not putting your name in the hat there? You're just going to shy away with that same one? I mean, who would you have?
Look, I mean, I thought they were hilarious under Ten Hag. I just thought that whole thing was hilarious, and that side of me just found it funny that he was just there, and I just thought it was just it was a really hilarious passage of time. I thought it was funny that he won the FA Cup and sort of kept hold of his job by the skin of his teeth. Allegri's the winner, but I'd be tempted, without following Portuguese football very closely, without following Sporting Lisbon very closely, I'd be really tempted to look at Ruben Amorim because what he's done at Sporting, Ollie's giggling at me. I'm not saying I'm a Sporting fan. I don't watch them every week, obviously. What he's done at Sporting in 2020 bought Amorim out of a contract with another club. I can't remember where he came from, right? It was 8 million. That's the highest amount ever paid. I think not just in Portuguese football. I think it might be the highest amount ever paid to get a coach out of a contract in Portuguese football, possibly beyond. And they did that because the technical director just said he's the man, he's going to be a great coach, and he's proved to be the case. Won 2 league titles to Sporting Lisbon. I think if you're Man United, you give it to him. Obviously, it would fail within 2 years because the structure of the club is so rotten that they'd have to give it to, Paul Scholes or whatever afterwards as a caretaker. All right, Premier League title race. Ollie, Arsenal 2, Liverpool 2. Let me tell you why I think the second half showed why Mikel Arteta will never win a league title with Arsenal. While Manchester City are there. Arsenal 2-1 up against Liverpool. They're at home. They're at the Emirates. Their entire objective this season is to win the league. They're 2-1 up, and they go into their own shell. Their foot should be down on the accelerator. They should be going for that third goal. They should not be considering Liverpool in the title race. They should be saying, we're at home, we're 2-1 up, we need to go for this. Instead, they retreat. They try and protect this 2-1 because they think they've got the best defence in the league. They may or may not. Statistically, at the moment, they don't. But they retreat because they think they've got the best defence. Because deep down, Mikel Arteta, I'm not saying this for the first time. Other people have said this. He is more Jose Mourinho than Pep Guardiola. There's no doubt about that. His instinct is as a defensive manager. And the issue is, it's not okay to draw games anymore because of the bar that Pep Guardiola and Manchester City have set. It's not okay to draw games. It's not okay to be 5 points behind at the back end of October. You need to be winning games. You need to be throwing caution to the wind. You need to do what Ferguson did all those years. You need to do what Klopp did. You need to flip the coin and see what happens. And he didn't do that. Liverpool got a second goal, and it was kind of at the end. Oh well, we had a lot of injuries, and a point's not a bad result, and that's kind of true. But it's also that is the reason you won't win the league because you're time wasting at 2-1, and that's ridiculous when you're trying to win the league, especially when you're trying to win the league against Manchester City. And there's a lot to like about this Arsenal side in terms of the quality they've got. And I feel sorry for them in some ways that they've come up at the same time as this Pep Guardiola dominance. But that's the reason that they won't win the league under Mikel Arteta.
It's a different narrative if they are 2-1 up at Anfield and get a 2-2 draw out of it completely, isn't it? If they're like it was at the Emirates this week, you look at that and you say, there's 2 points let slip through your fingers. The other thing I wonder is if they hadn't put on such a dogged, resilient defensive display against Manchester City earlier this year, does Arteta back that defence as much? Because, look, they came undone right at the death, obviously, against City, down to 10 men. Does Arteta get more confidence in that back line by that display and think, right, well, it's 2-1, I don't want to risk it. For whatever reason, I don't understand why Arteta doesn't want to risk it, because let's face it, he's come up through that City coaching stuff, so he knows how to work in a club that knows that kind of balls to the wall. We're just going to go out and keep scoring, and believe we can keep scoring. So I don't know where that negative attitude comes in from, and I do wonder if perhaps if it hadn't been so down to the wire against City earlier, if he kind of goes, oh, maybe we could do with another one just in case.
And I also think there's a fair point to be made here that when Liverpool scored the second goal to make it 2 apiece, Jurgen Klopp at that point, a Jurgen Klopp side, they try and win that game. And I think maybe they do win that game 3-2. That doesn't take away from what Arne Slot's doing, because there's plenty of games where Arne Slot's philosophy and tactics mean that they pick up points where Klopp's sides wouldn't. But at that point, Arsenal's defence was kind of in disarray because they'd had these injuries and substitutions. It was a bit of a ragtag 11 at that point for Arsenal. Liverpool scored to make it 2 apiece. All the momentum's with Liverpool at that point. And I think a Jurgen Klopp side just kind of says, fuck it. Like, let's go. And if we lose 3-2, we lose 3-2, but we're going to go for the win here. And it's just a difference in managers, as I say. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. Someone made the point to me earlier today, Ollie, that you kind of watch your football team how your coach watches the football team. As in, if you're a Liverpool fan and you're watching when Jurgen Klopp's in charge, you've got that same kind of mad energy, like, fuck, it's 2-2, let's just go for it, come on, make this change, let's go for it. And under Arne Slot, somehow, if you're a Liverpool fan, you're kind of sat back on your chair at 2-1 down. You're thinking, okay, we can relax a little bit, I'm sure there's another goal in it, and you get the 2-2, and you don't think, right, throw everyone forward, let's try and nick this. You think, okay, 2-2, decent result. It's very Dutch, it's very considered, and I just think you sort of watch your football team in the same way as your manager. It kind of mirrors the energy of your head coach.
Yeah, what they're giving out, you feed off completely. I mean, everybody feeds off energy in some way in so many aspects of life. You can talk about doing a broadcast.
Oh, he's so philosophical today, man.
Well,
like,
no, but
energy cannot be created or destroyed.
I wouldn't go into that far. Yeah, I'm not getting into Nietzsche or anything like that. Life is what you make of it in your own mind, or whatever his philosophy was. But it's more, when you have 600 supporters in a football stadium, if those 600 supporters are given the same gusto as 12,000 and they're in a small stadium, it feels like there's 12,000 in that 800-seater stadium, and you want to broadcast, you feed off that energy. So 600 noisy supporters can get you through a game way more than 6,000 in a 60,000-seater stadium that are making echoes around the place because they can't do it. So in that same way, if you see your manager on the sideline, on the touchline, giving it that Klopp energy and emotion, and after the game, that fist pump that for me became a bit of a hack thing more than anything else, but it's a thing, it becomes your thing. The fans feed off that, and it creates that connection, that relationship. And it's really important having that energy to create the connection with the fans. It's weird with Arteta in that sense when you think about that, and this is literally just thinking off the top of my head as I'm talking about this. You don't see that same connection emotionally between Arteta and Arsenal supporters like a Klopp and Liverpool. Obviously, Sir Alex Ferguson's a very different case indeed. But even Mourinho, when he goes into a place, he makes every single supporter feel like it's them against the world, because that's Mourinho's philosophy of us against the world. And it does create more of a rapport. And actually with Arteta, Arsenal fans may really like him, but I don't see Arsenal fans in the stands kind of having that almost emotional bond with a Mikel Arteta, because his energy is a bit all over the place, and maybe it's a bit too erratic, his energy as well. And we've talked about the emotion that he leads off with, and maybe that's kind of a negative for this Arsenal side, and it may reflect with that relationship with the supporters as well right now.
I think a lot of Arsenal fans will be listening to this and obviously completely disagreeing with us. Look, Mikel Arteta is obviously a very, very good coach. A very, very good coach. I think my point is here that you need to be so perfect to beat City that the fact that he's just a bit defensive when he needs to be more offensive is a real problem. And he obviously thinks we don't have as good an attack as City, so therefore we need to have a much, much, much better defence than City, and we're going to win the league that way. And I just can't see it.
But it's not, as you say, it's not the best defence in the Premier League right now. Liverpool's still the best defence. Nuno Espirito Santo's got Forest conceding 7 right now, which has not been talked about enough, really, considering we've discussed, obviously, Liverpool and lauding them all season for an amazing defence. To think that Forest, the Premier League table is bonkers when you start getting out of that top 4, top 5 right now. You go City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Villa obviously have been a great rise over the last few years, Chelsea. Then you go Brighton, Forest, Tottenham, Brentford, Fulham. That is not a group of sides that anybody would expect at the beginning of a season. Obviously, Brighton are continuing to establish themselves, but Tottenham are way below par. Brentford, I don't consider still a Premier League side. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about the Premier League this year was actually this weekend, arguably the best game was Brentford against Ipswich, and that highlighted to me how good the Championship is compared to the Premier League. Because
that's fair.
I don't think you get that result in the Premier League like that.
And let's get on to that. Let me just wrap up Arsenal 2, Liverpool 2, Ollie, because there was a fascinating, surreal, very unusual quote this week from Trent Alexander-Arnold. And he was given the option of winning essentially the World Cup or the Balon d'Or. Do you just roll your eyes because I'm talking about Trent again, Ollie?
Trent Alexander-Arnold and Balon d'Ors, we're getting to a point. All right.
Ollie, he said he'd prefer to win the Balon d'Or than another Champions League or the World Cup. Now, the first thing to say is that is what a Real Madrid player says. That is Real Madrid player chat. That's an odd thing to say. It's very individualized in what is a team sport. It's a strange thing to say. And the first thing I thought was, okay, well, he's going to Real Madrid then. That's obvious. The second thing is, it's a team sport, and you've never won. The league and the Champions League he's won, so I kind of get that. But the World Cup, mate, you want to win a Ballon d'Or instead of the World Cup. Think about in 30 years, if you win the World Cup, you're still in a WhatsApp group with all those players from that World Cup squad, right? If you win the Ballon d'Or, you're sat at home at 80 and you can see the Ballon d'Or trophy in your home, but what else? No one cares. I thought it was an unusual thing to say.
I think the Ballon d'Or is a massively overblown football award now, because there is so many levels of contention around who wins it. Obviously, the Ronaldo-Messi era it's very difficult to argue against either of them. But at the same time, that made it extremely boring as well, because you're like, well, yeah, it's either going to be CR7 or Messi. It doesn't really matter. And when Modric won it, it was actually, oh shit, they've actually looked away at somebody else and gone, no, you are actually the best player internationally and for your club right now, and you are leading these sides to exceptional things at World Cups and in the Champions League, etc. You deserve to be up there and winning a Balon d'Or. And it was kind of like a revelation. But I haven't really cared about the Balon d'Or probably since like Kaká won it. That was well over a decade ago, 15 years ago. And I don't really care about this year's one. I mean, it's very funny, the report that Vinicius Jr. is refusing to attend tonight's Ballon d'Or ceremony where Rodri is expected to pick up the accolade. But I don't think it means half as much as it used to when we have a constant array. Like, there's FIFA's The Best Award, there's the Ballon d'Or, there's Manager of the Month award every single month in the Premier League.
But why would Trent say that? Why would you say that in an interview? Well, even if you believe that and you don't give a fuck about the World Cup or your teammates, you just want me. Why would you say that?
Well, this is why it's so weird that he'd even care about winning a Ballon d'Or, particularly when he's probably got no chance whatsoever. You could have a great season, but I think as a fullback, you're just going to get overlooked for goal scorers, attacking midfielders, etc. It's in the same way that the NFL's MVP award, it goes to a quarterback. Every single year. You could be a running back that breaks all the records in a year. There was a guy called Cooper Kupp who led the league in receptions, yards, and touchdowns. Didn't win Best Player of the Year award in the NFL. Didn't win the MVP. Went to a quarterback instead. Because it's just like, well, that's the most important position, so we'll have that. Football's going to be, attacking midfielder, that's going to be the best. Sure, we'll throw a defender in there, second or third or something, but it's not going to be that. So I imagine Trent Alexander-Arnold is maybe saying this with like a bit of a wry smile at it, because it'd be a defender maybe to win it, and that would be something very unique indeed. But if it's not, it's just a really ugly statement. Just a really ugly statement. What did I say at the beginning of this show? It's all about quick fix, doing this. In the same way that the world is becoming very much about me, rather than a broader look at maybe, okay, well, if 7 of us can have a good time, maybe I'll sacrifice a little bit of my individualism and not just go looking for solo accolades. I've never seen a good football player or a good manager come out and say, when they win an individual accolade, oh, this is great, it's all about me. It's about everybody else around me. I need to have that support system around me to get these individual accolades. So really, it's all about them. Christ, they even do it at the Oscars. And aren't actors meant to be like the most selfish, narcissistic people on the planet? I don't know any, so I don't know. No. But so for Trent Alexander to say this, and as you say, as a World Cup, like, just do us a favour. Like, no one, as you say, will remember your name if you go out there and win a Ballon d'Or, in the same way that if you win a World Cup, people will recite that starting 11 forever in this country.
Yeah, I agree. Ollie, talk us about Saturday's Premier League action then. You enjoyed the late goals and the drama and the 7-goal thriller at Brentford.
Yeah, no, Brentford 4, Ipswich 3. It just highlights to me that the Championship's a better league more than anything else. I was watching Match of the Day when I got back on Saturday. I've had an extremely busy weekend, so I was only catching up on a few bits. And like City Southampton, yeah, fine. Like Villa Bournemouth was a pretty interesting watch. But the 2 best games were Brighton Wolves and Brentford Ipswich by a mile on Saturday. And it just shows to me that and then you go into the Championship and a little bit further down some of the Football League as well, and we had some amazing finishes to some games in terms of late drama. And the idea of the unknown is still just making me have more of a lure to watch Football League highlights right now than Premier League highlights, which is insane to think, because the Premier League is the best quality of football, but I still feel for kind of entertainment and excitement, it's hard to compete with the Championship and that element of anyone can beat anybody. And it's summed up.
VAR.
No VAR, yeah, that's lovely. And it's summed up by when people do that Soccer 6 and there's only, say, 5 games in the Premier League on a Saturday like there was this week, and they throw a Championship game in. And everyone's like, oh, no one's going to win this week. Because it doesn't matter what Championship game you throw in, it's never going to be what anybody thinks it's going to be. Like Preston against Blackburn, that could be a 5-5. It could be a 0-0 and the worst game of football you've seen. And you genuinely don't know until you get through the 90 minutes. Like I did Stoke against Bristol City last week on the Tuesday night. We had over 30 shots and 17 on target and it finished 2-2. But Stoke dominated the first 20 minutes, and you thought the Robins were going to get completely carted out of there, back down to
Windsor on the edit as well.
Yeah, beautiful work. Beautiful work. You know how good the game was.
Yeah, it was fun, man. It was fun. The EFL's awesome.
So I just can't. I struggle to sit, particularly at a side like City against a side like Southampton. And Southampton gave City a great run for their money this weekend. And, all of the post-match interviews on Match of the Day were basically City players going, they're fucking good, aren't they? But City are going to come away with 3 points because that is the way the Premier League is. And you just don't have that in the Championship. And I kind of miss sides like Ipswich being in the Championship because I really enjoyed watching and covering them a lot last season.
Jose Mourinho. Ollie. Jose Mourinho has morphed into a caricature of a caricature. He is a cartoon comic figure in the footballing world. And I, for one, don't actually find it funny. I actually find it kind of sad. And I say this because this week, Fenerbahçe, Mourinho now managers, took on Manchester United in the Europa League. And the entire week was a Mourinho a pantomime, a Mourinho pantomime. So in the pre-match press conference, he said he wanted his winner's medal from the 2018 Premier League season because City will get stripped of their titles and Man United finished second that year. I actually thought that was quite funny, right? But then he gets sent off in the game. His actions are absolutely absurd. Then in the post-match press conference, it's this mad combination of English sarcasm, Portuguese kind of surrealism, because what he said is, the interviewer said, what are you going to do next, basically, in your career? And he said, well, I can't manage a club that's in UEFA competitions, obviously because he thinks everyone in UEFA's against him and all the decisions are going against him. So I'm going to manage a side in the bottom of English football so UEFA can't, prevent me from doing well. I thought, Jesus Christ, man, if you believe 1% of this is really scary. And I say this as, I'm actually a Mourinho fan because, Ollie, one of my foremost memories, really, of watching football is that man in his late 30s, actually I think he was early 40s, when he won the Champions League with Porto. I'm going to say that again for our younger listeners. Jose Mourinho won the Champions League with Porto. It was fucking incredible. And when Porto scored at Old Trafford to take them through in the knockout stages, he runs down the touchline. I mean, it's super iconic. I don't need to go over it. But you saw a man in his absolute pomp, movie star good looks, a charismatic, brilliant genius of a manager, and then we saw that in the next decade or so, maybe 15 years or so afterwards in European club football. And I just think he's 61 years old, Ollie. He shouldn't be where he is now. He shouldn't be where he is now. Carlo Ancelotti's at Real Madrid at 64. 61 in football management, you should be pretty much at your peak, or, maybe coming to the end, but you're pretty much at your absolute pomp, as in, you're still a relatively young man, but you've got all the experience. And I find it very odd that Mourinho is where he is. And I think some of the kind of meme content now around Mourinho is, oh, never change, Jose. Never change. Oh, how can you not love this man? And it's like, man, you should have changed because the game moves quick and you didn't adapt. And that's why you're at fucking Fenerbahçe, which is obviously a big club in Turkey, but it's not a big club in terms of European competition, let's be honest. So with Jose Mourinho, I just find it a bit odd, man. He's in the 4 seasons in Istanbul managing Fenerbahçe when he should be at a Bayern, a Man United, or a Real Madrid. I just think it's odd, and this kind of the world's against me version of Mourinho is one that I can't get on board with because I remember the glory days.
Feels a little bit like the Leonardo DiCaprio of the footballing world, right? Handsome man,
let him
good
cook.
looks, right? Early on in his pomp, early in the career, everybody loves him and he's got the looks to match and everything like that. And now everybody finds it a little bit weird that he's running through clubs for a very short amount of time and then on to the next one. And it's become a bit of a joke, but it's also
down.
But it's become, it's become a joke, but also in the background you're a bit like, it's a joke that's getting a bit too far now. And every time he crops up, it seems to get a little bit weirder and a little bit weirder. Now, Mourinho's got an even crazier factor, obviously, with everything he says and does. And, I mean, the press conference when he was at Manchester United a number of years ago now, where he's like, big deal, I've got 1, 2 titles, 3 titles, whatever. I mean, I loved it. And that kind of arrogance is great. But now he doesn't have the ability to back it up because it's that, what have you done recently? And
Fenerbahçe aren't doing very well, by the way. They're not doing very well. I know they won at the weekend, but they're kind of a few points off Galatasaray, I think, at the top of the Turkish standings. I mean, he's in trouble there.
And it's it's too much drama, I think, for clubs to deal with at this point. The kind of Mourinho pantomime, the Mourinho circus, and I don't know where he goes after Fenerbahçe, because it's only at most it's a 3-year spell anyway. It always is. It's never more than that. Like, where do you go at this point? Like, Turkish football's the last one with the money. It will be Saudi Arabia, but isn't there a chance Jose Mourinho talks himself into some trouble? Because if you start making Jose Mourinho comments in Saudi Arabia about owners of other teams or the league officials or anything like that in Saudi Arabia, I don't think they really mess around with that in the same way. You know, it could be a problem. So wouldn't advise that. The only place that would be fun would be really, really fun to see him go.
Say it.
Is either to one of the big two in Argentina or Brazil. In Brazil, it would be an absolute riot, the Mourinho circus. If he went to a club, one of those Brazilian clubs that's got a bit of money about
It's more
them.
fun in Argentina, Ollie. It's
So
funnier
much
if he goes to Boca or River. And I want to talk about the Libertadores very briefly, but it's just hilarious if he goes to Boca or River. I cannot tell you, Ollie and I, who've lived and worked out in Argentina and sampled a bit of what life's like out there, the fanatical fan bases and just how football's covered out there. I cannot tell you how funny it would be. Like, the amount of random shit that would happen within days of him arriving. I mean, they'd have to shut down the airport for a start. This is like when Daniele De Rossi went to Boca at the end of his career. His flight arrived at like 4 a.m. and the airport was like packed with like Boca fans.
Thousands of them.
So Jose Mourinho, I don't even know what you'd do with this. One more thing about Mourinho. Ollie, yeah, sorry, go for it. You can say something.
No, I was just thinking, how do you top the Marcus Rojo fire extinguisher in the tunnel moment?
He would.
But Mourinho would, but you just don't know where that's going to go,
I mean, also, if he did go there, I mean, they don't have the money to pay him anything. So it would be, he'd have to take a 95% pay cut. It'd be hilarious.
They find a way. They find a way.
That's it. And, Jose, for all his faults, he obviously is very money motivated, but he strikes me as one of those men that might just be like, fuck it, I got money in the bank. I'll do a season at River Plate. One thing also, Ollie, that the Daily Mail, which is not my newspaper of choice, but I did find this article fairly amusing. They sent a reporters at Istanbul. Jose Mourinho lives in the Four Seasons in Istanbul, right? £1,000 a night suite. And loves living in a hotel. Can't begrudge him that. Like, who wouldn't live in the Four Seasons if they had the chance? But so they got a Daily Mail reporter to just stay in the hotel. Obviously didn't have any kind of exclusive interview with him, and just like watch him and see what he did. And apparently every night in the Four Seasons hotel, he has a margarita pizza, a bottle of sparkling water, and some ice cream. And I just think, so often we think peak performance looks incredible, right? And just like every night they were there, they were watching him, and they weren't allowed an interview with him, but the reporter just watched him eat a margarita pizza, some sparkling water, and some ice cream. And I just thought, I don't know, that really tickled me that like no one's too good for just like that's their daily routine.
You and him are one and the same. I love the bife de lomo with a side of chips and a sparkling water and a cookie, and that's Dave Windsor's Argentina nights done and dusted. You are one and the same, you and Jose.
I don't think Wilson doesn't join me for a little cookie, little chocolate cookie.
Every so often, you did lure me round to those. The bakeries are strong in Buenos Aires for sure, man.
Let's wrap up the football stuff. Derby d'Italia, talk us through it, Ollie.
If this was
4-4.
If this was any game in the Premier League, we'd be front and centre of the show with it. 4-4 banger between Inter and Juventus. And look, the game itself. You can't say anything more about it. 4-4 tells you exactly what it was. It's just a ding-dong affair between two sides, and two of the best sides in Italy that have this great rivalry. But my thought was more on this was Italian football's fallen so far and is so removed from our screens right now that this has barely had any sort of interaction from a newspaper at all, any sort of inclination for anybody else to look into it. I think you're the only person that I've spoken to that kind of knew about the Derby d'Italia being on this week, aside from my old man. And then the other thing is football rivalries are better than football derbies. And I know they're calling it the Derby d'Italia, but it's Inter Juventus. It's two sides in northern Italy, but they're not so close that you'd call it a derby by any stretch. But rivalries are so much better than a derby. Give me Man U Liverpool over City Manchester United, for instance. Like, I don't know what it is, but we need to start revering rivalries far more than derbies and keep almost the animosity of a rivalry going more than that kind of, we live in the same town, so we have to be enemies. Because you get two teams quite often that just aren't within touching distance of each other, as has kind of happened over the last few years with Milan and Inter in terms of Inter's dominance of that rivalry. But the Milan-Juve and the Inter-Juve games in Italian football are so much better. The rivalry between Fiorentina and Juventus is so much better than so many other games that you get around Italian football, like Siena against Fiorentina or something like that, the local rivals. And I just love the fact that this week we had the best rivalry, arguably, in Italian football, giving us probably the best game in Europe this weekend. And it astonished me that no one saw it. And no one even paid attention to it. And this is a top league. This is a top league in Europe.
Explain the situation with Italian football on English telly, Ollie. What is it on ITVX now or no? Where is it tucked away? It's nowhere.
There are 2 games a weekend on TNT Sports. That's the deal they've got now. It's just a 2-game deal every single weekend. So they take the Sunday night game, which is Fiorentina this week. Also, I think it was a 5-1 that Fiorentina had on Sunday night, and then they have one other game, and Matt Smith and Nigel Spackman ended up doing the Derby d'Italia before that as well. So you still have Adam Summerton on the Sunday nights. Everything else is on One Football, which is an app that
nobody has.
I didn't know it was there until somebody I know kind of pointed me towards it. But the rumour is that the rights are held by a production company right now who don't have the ability to put it on their platform. So what they're doing is they're kind of leasing it out to One Football at the moment, who are offering this subscription, but you can only watch it live. You can't go back and watch it later on or anything like that on One Football, which is kind of completely pointless to me. And then eventually, come the new year, the Italian football will go on this production company's platform, and it will then be available to watch, aside from the 2 games that TNT Sports will have, and they get the prime picks every single weekend. So it'll be there. But again, it's unlikely that it'll be anything apart from the World Feed commentators. There'll be nothing kind of tailored, I think, around it or anything like that. It'll be, here's an app, here's where it is, go and watch it. You can rewatch it if you want. So we're just getting to that point of what so much sports broadcasting is becoming of, just get it out, get it on there. It doesn't really matter how it looks or sounds. And yeah, that's the way. Fingers crossed. I don't know for sure the ins and outs on that, and I hope that it's done and revered as like a top league, because we've seen when these leagues are produced and put together well, when the Bundesliga was at BT, when Sky had the Spanish, and when the Italian football was either on Channel 4 or on TNT Sports the last few years, and not at BT as well, it was done well with James Richardson and Horncastle, or Rafa Honigstein, Julien Laurent, etc. And it brought the context that people want to hear about the games and why they matter. Like someone now who's only grown up probably in the last, say a 15-year-old right now, you say Derby d'Italia, they wouldn't have a clue that it's even Inter Juve. And then if you said Inter against Juve, they'd go, wouldn't really understand the kind of rivalry or even the importance of either of those 2 footballing sides to European football's pedigree, let alone Italian football, etc. And it's just something sad, because we're just getting narrower and narrower in our view scope of football. I think it's just a shame, to be honest, mate.
That's why you should listen to Not Another Sports Pod every week to keep you up to date on everything that's going on in the wonderful world of sport.
Especially on the other side of the planet as well, where all of our Libertadores dreams have been dashed in one fell swoop, Mr. Windsor.
Just before we talk about Libertadores, can I ask you one question, Ollie? Dusan Vlahović, the Juventus forward, they signed from Fiorentina. I covered Serie A for 2 years, just as to join Juventus, actually. And I loved him. I loved the work rate. He had quite an unusual style. He was happy to drop off. I didn't mind the kind of woe is me, like weight of the world on my shoulders thing he had going on. I thought he was immense. Incredible free kick taker. I thought for sure when I watched him, I was like, he's going to be in the Premier League within 2 years. Hasn't quite happened, but just looked at his stats for this season. He's kind of back, scoring goals, back to his best, yeah?
Yeah, definitely. Looks... Well, he's not playing in Allegri's side. I mean, this is the thing that we touched about with Chiesa as well at Juventus, is that Juventus are more free-flowing going forward. Thiago Motta's getting really positive results out of every single attacking player, it seems, in this Juve side right now. And they're a very enjoyable team to watch. And Vlahović has been given that middle of the park, right, just roam. Because you know he can play left and right as well and create an attacking threat from either flank. But he's also got that support either side of him as well. So the training wheels have kind of been taken off now, this Juventus team going forward, and they are being given that freedom of expression and a bit more fluidity, which Vlahović, it plays into his football so much more. He's a very good finisher. He can run in behind. He can also come back, drop deep, and play those balls in and around the 18-yard box to either others or shoot from distance. So we might see this, but the trouble is, again, like, people just don't really respect Italian football anymore. And if you do it in Italy, it kind of means nothing. I mean, look at Victor Osimhen.
That is one of the craziest things. Like, again, if you don't watch Italian football, this might not resonate with you. But Victor Osimhen, when I was covering football out in Italy, I would have put everything I owned on him going to the Premier League or Real Madrid or Barcelona and being a massive success. Like, he was an astonishing striker, astonishing, and now he's in Turkey. In the peak of his, 25, 26, however old he is.
Like, better than Lukaku ever looked in Italy,
agree.
without a doubt.
100%,
And it's like
100%.
every skill that Osimhen has is translatable to a Premier League football game. You know, Haaland looks just bullish and like a brick unit that can finish in any way. Osimhen's kind of like that, but he's got almost a bit more grace than Haaland's vulgarity that he kind of plays with. He's shoving people around. Osimhen will do that, but he's got such a good piece of control and can pirouette so neat and tidily, even with like quite a sizable frame to him. I loved watching him, and it's just. But it's money. It all comes down to money, doesn't it, Dave? I mean, Serie doesn't have the money to hold on to these guys, and if Premier League clubs aren't interested, they'll go where the money is, and Galatasaray apparently is the one.
Vlahović is a great punt for a top 6 side in the Premier League who need a striker. I'm surprised that Arsenal or something haven't gone for him. But let's wrap up football now with talking about the Libertadores, Ollie. It was the semi-finals of the Copa Libertadores. Week just gone. If you're a regular listener to Not Another Sports Pod, you'll know that we've talked a lot about Brazilian domination in this competition. But, I mean, if you thought we were exaggerating, let me just read out the semi-final results in the Copa Libertadores this week. Botafogo 5, Peñarol, who've won the competition 5 times, 0, and Atlético Mineiro 3, River Plate of Argentina, who've won the competition 4 times, 0. I mean, it's an all-Brazilian final, and I don't know what to say.
All at home, so you never know. You go away to Argentina and to Uruguay.
No side has ever come from 3 goals down in a knockout stage to. No side has ever overcome a 3-goal deficit in the semi-finals of the Libertadores, basically, and Gallardo's not going to do that. By the way, Gallardo, the manager of River, who I absolutely love and everyone loves for what he's done, he got obliterated apparently in the Argentine media because at 1-0 down, he goes chasing the game, and you lose at 1-0, you go back to the Monumental in Buenos Aires, and it's absolutely tie on. But 3-0, it's over. It's an all-Brazilian final. I've got one question for you, Ollie. Do governing bodies... At what point should a governing body step in and try and rectify the complete dominance of one nation in a continental club competition? As in, if you're head of CONMEBOL, you've got a problem. You've got a big, big problem. This Brazilian side domination, which has gone on for a decade, it's going to go on for the next decade. I mean, it's so ridiculous now. So do you restrict the amount of Brazilian sides that can compete in the competition? As in, do you give them less places? Find a way to mangle the rules? Obviously, you'll piss off Brazilian sides. But how do you stop this without stopping it? How do you bend the rules? How do you do this? Do you know what I mean?
I'm gonna be a real dick, but this has been a narrative running through my house, and it's fewer places, not less, fewer places.
I've heard you rant about this. Yeah.
No, I honestly don't know, because unfortunately the dominance isn't due to the setup of the competition. Yes, Argentinian and Brazilian sides get more sides in. As leagues get more sides in the CONMEBOL Libertadores and in the CONMEBOL Sudamericana. They get to bypass qualifying rounds at various points for those competitions, etc. There's more teams in the group stages of both of those competitions from Argentina and Brazil. But the dominance comes from the financial way that Brazil set up its league. And you cannot, I think, as CONMEBOL, tell Brazil how to allow your clubs to be run, when actually it's the insistence almost. And it's beautiful, and I love the fact that they do this, but the insistence of sides from Argentina, Ecuador, etc., to be run the way that they're run, particularly the Argentinian sides. If you put Boca...
Just clear that up, Ollie, for those who aren't familiar with the structure of South American club football. As in they're fan-owned, essentially Boca's owned by its members.
Yeah, it's a membership club. And if you're a member of the club, you can get a season ticket at the football club, but you can use the swimming pool facilities. You go to Vélez Sarsfield and there is an athletics area next to the stadium that has... small football pitches and volleyball pitches and basketball courts, which as a member you are able to use, as well as obviously paying your way into voting rights for things like the club president, etc. So they're run like that rather than run like an out-and-out business. And clubs like Boca and River are tying two hands behind their back right now because they are big enough sides on a global stage with iconic venues, iconic logos and badges, with marketability. Boca shirts and some River Plate shirts, more Boca Juniors shirts, you'll see in London walking around the place. You know, you go to a retro sports bar, 100% there's a Maradona shirt hung up in a bar in the yellow and blue of Boca. And if they continue to operate the way they do and restrict themselves, unlike the Brazilian sides that have allowed big ownership to come in and start controlling the clubs and feed money that generates bigger transfers, bigger wages, better managers, better coaching staff, more coaching staff, there's no way to compete. And CONMEBOL has no right really to go into Brazil and say you can't do that. And they cannot afford to have fewer clubs from Brazil and Argentina in those competitions because A, they drive the viewership when, let's face it, the group stages, much like the Champions League to some extent, feel a bit of a non-entity at times, particularly in the CONMEBOL Sudamericana. And not only that, those clubs, if the number of teams from Brazil is reduced, could easily turn around and say, well, why would we even bother sending any teams? CONMEBOL's beholden to them. Mm-hmm. So the power lies with Brazil and the clubs, and they're utilising it how they want to, and it's meaning we have more and more all Brazil finals. Whereas to put the shift across to the CONMEBOL Sudamericana, Dave, where the knockout stages mean something. Look, we've got two Brazilians. It could still be an all Brazilian final in the Sudamericana. But we've got a 2-2 between Corinthians and Racing Club, and we have a 1-1 against between Cruzeiro and Lanús, which, firstly, Lanús are a team that are kind of there and thereabouts fairly often in this competition, but Cruzeiro 5 years ago were in the second division of Brazilian football. Corinthians are one of the biggest names, obviously, in Brazil, but Racing Club is a chance for them to compete on the international stage again. And yeah, there's a dominance when you get sometimes to the quarterfinals, but you still get Independiente Medellin or Independiente del Valle from Colombia or Ecuador, where you genuinely think in that competition it can go through. And if I was at CONMEBOL, I'd focus all of my knockout stage marketing attention on that competition because it's more interesting to me.
Just to clarify for anyone not familiar, so the Libertadores is the Champions League of South America, and the Sudamericana is the Europa League. Just so people are kind of aware of how niche we're delving into things. But I do agree Sudamericana is a great competition. I think, Ollie, that if you wanted to throw the cat amongst the pigeons, you make that massive play to get MLS sides into the Libertadores sooner rather than later. You have. Don't look at me like that. You know it's the right thing to do. You get, while Messi's still alive, while Messi's still kicking a football, you somehow find a way to invite Inter Miami into the Libertadores in 2026 or whenever you can do it. Because the minute you get Messi playing at La Bombonera, the minute you get MLS sides, you get Inter Miami playing River Plate or whatever. It's a cash cow. I can't believe they haven't done it yet. The only reason they haven't done it is geography and there's too many games. Blah, blah, blah. Make it happen. More is more.
Don't have it be a cash cow. It doesn't have to be a cash cow. It needs to be sporting integrity and credibility and quality. And having the final line on that being a cash cow just breaks your heart a little bit because this is sport.
Yeah, but it makes sense. But I'm saying it from a sporting perspective, Ollie.
No, I know. It gets more eyes and attention. And
and if you get Messi, if you get the greatest player of all time playing at La Bombonera, which is Boca Juniors' ground, that anyone that's been will tell you it's absolutely insane. Or at River Plate as ground, the Monumental. I just think it's a story that completely transcends the continent.
The best thing that ever happened to that competition was the delayed final between River and Boca. That was the best thing that ever happened to that competition. Because you cannot condone the violence around the stadiums that took place, but that made bigger headlines than any other competition in the CONMEBOL Libertadores has for years.
2018 Libertadores final he's referencing. Look it up because if you don't know the story, it's
a South American football competition that gets moved to Madrid. That's how bad it gets.
Absolutely wild what happened there. All right, that's a great football chat, Ollie. Let's go other sport. I know you want to talk about Ironman, but can I just...
No, go on.
Yeah. All right, I just want to squeeze in the Diego Forlán line first. This was last week, but I just did find it very interesting. Diego Forlán, former Man United striker, 45 years old, will make his professional tennis debut in an ATP doubles event in his native Uruguay next month. And it got me thinking about people... about sporting stars who've excelled in one sporting profession and then, transformed into another. And I couldn't really think of any before we logged on, Ollie. Didn't Petr Cech have a go at ice hockey? Or go on, put me out of my misery.
Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan
Okay.
went from the NBA, won 3 titles, went and played baseball, and then came back to the sport. You can believe all of the rumours around why that was, whether it was Jordan's gambling problems or anything like that. But Jordan took time out, went, I think it was with the White Sox, Chicago White Sox, played baseball, didn't do terribly, wasn't great, but wasn't Michael Jordan of the MLB. He was another MLB player, and then went back to the NBA and won 3 more titles with the Bulls and was like, no, I'm the king. That's the best one without a doubt of multi-sport athletes. Bo Jackson actually was an incredible NFL player and baseball player, and there's a lot of American footballers who go into the Major League Baseball draft. There are teams that own the rights to people like Russell Wilson in the NFL, who is a Super Bowl winning quarterback with the Seattle Seahawks, but because he was in the Major League Baseball draft out of college because he played baseball when he wasn't playing American football at college, he is owned by his rights are owned by a baseball team. So there's quite a few multi-sport athletes that never get the option to actually dive into their second sport sometimes.
UK have also got, I did know this one, Victoria Pendleton, who's a British Olympic cyclist.
Yeah.
And then she became a jockey, and she actually competed at Cheltenham, which is pretty impressive. I know Ian Botham, one of England's most famous cricketers, also played rugby league, I believe.
I believe he's in a boat race as well, but I think that might have been in the hut at the cricket club rather than out on the water. But both of them loved a little drink. So.
Yeah, interesting character for sure. All right, tell us about Ironman, Ollie, and F1.
Well, let's link the two together, shall we? Because
Beautiful.
Incredible feat has been done by a former motor racing driver, Billy Monger, who actually presents on occasion on Channel 4's Formula 1 coverage, as becoming the fastest amputee to complete the Kona Ironman World Championships by 2 hours, which is pretty incredible. So he's had a leg removed above the knee and a leg removed below the knee after a crash in 2017. And he completed the Ironman in Kona in Hawaii at the World Championships in 14 hours and 23 minutes and 56 seconds, which, let's face it, that is a long time doing any sort of activity, let alone a 4K swim, 180-kilometer bike ride, and a marathon on top of that. But it's just an incredible story. It's what we were talking about last week. If this isn't Billy Monger, who is a TV personality now to some extent, and he is also doing this to raise money for comic relief, and that's an incredible thing to do. But if this was just another random guy breaking the Ironman world record for an amputee by 2 hours, I don't think anybody touches it. And I think it's great that Billy Monger is using his presence to do this and draw attention to it. And I think we should basically just look at it and say that's fucking incredible at the end of the day. Like, that is insane to have been a top-level motor racing driver that was on the verge of potentially a really good career at the lower levels of professional motorsport, to being able to turn your hand to being a TV personality and then have that drive to train, compete, and do this is pretty incredible.
It is the kind of thing that makes you just tell yourself to shut up every time you can complain about stuff. Do you know what I mean? It's like this guy... I'm just reading the backstory here, Ollie. So his legs were amputated after he was involved in that near-fatal crash. This is back in 2017. So he obviously had this dream of being a racing driver. And to have that dream destroyed in the most insane circumstances, and then to reinvent yourself as an Ironman. And by the way, the Ironman thing, like Ollie mentioned the distances, but let's just do it again because I know a couple of people that have done it, and it's just fucking crazy. Like a 3.8 kilometer swim. Which he did in 1 hour, 7 minutes, 29 seconds. 180 kilometer cycle in 7 hours, 26 minutes, 50 seconds. And then you finish with a marathon, which he did in 5:26, which is like not, it's decent. So
most people would do one of those events and train for just one of those to do
and dine out on it the rest of their life. and dine on out,
Yeah.
And this guy, he's 25 years old. He's obviously not going to stop. There's another we need on the pod, Ollie. We'll have to do like a pod series where we interview some of these,
he'll be on Jake Humphreys, won't he? That Excellence podcast or whatever. He'll be on that first and foremost for sure. Yeah, and then he's going to be the face of Huel after they've done that running guy a few weeks back. So Huel are going to get. They live down the road apparently. Huel, they live in the town, like just down the road. The people that own Huel. I was like, after we've slagged them off, I was like, I could go around the
chocolate,
house.
the chocolate milkshake kings of Leighton Buzzard.
Pink Lamborghini, not classy. But then also a record broken in the men's competition anyway. The record-breaking performance of Patrick Lang, the German who has completed that Ironman in 7 hours, 35 minutes and 53 seconds to break the record, 3-time Kona Ironman world champion. Triathletes are just a next level breed of psychopath. I mean, you have to have so many screws loose to see. I mean, I was working on another triathlon this weekend. Thankfully, it wasn't a 7.5 hour broadcast. It was about 2 hours Olympic distance kind of thing. But even that, like, you think a 10K run, 40K bike ride and a 1.5 kilometre swim to kick things off.
Mate,
it's just not.
You know what I also think? You know how there's a whole industry now, and you've got your David Goggins figures about how like that mentality is so insane, right? And people listen to all these podcasts and they read the books and they'll listen to the audiobooks to try to, like, I guess, capture some of that person's mentality. But let's be honest, you can't. Like, that person had an individual set of circumstances and his brain is wired in an individual way. Like, David Goggins or Billy Monger can talk to you for 10 hours. They could be your personal life coach for 10 years. They couldn't translate what they have inside them. So I often think those podcasts are just like, they're interesting, but you're never gonna have that mentality. Do you know what I mean? Like, I hate to break it to anyone listening, like, you ain't doing that. Like, it's because you didn't have that life. Like, you didn't. If
you're the guy that is saying, "Oh, I'm gonna get up at 6 a.m. and go for a run," and you don't get up at 4 a.m. and go for a run, you're not a Billy Monger or a David Goggins. Like, even if you get up and you're like, "Oh, I'll get out for 6:30, fine." That's so much less than like these elite guys are willing to do. And there was a girl this week, Claire Cashmore, who had her funding taken away from her this year from British Triathlon because she hadn't been achieving as well as was needed. And then she ended up. It wasn't Claire Cashmore. The name will come to me in a second. I apologise, but yeah, she basically had her funding taken away, and then the first World Cup of the year she competes in March, she wins in Hong Kong. She had a bronze medal at the end of this year, and it's like, it's a great motivation of like, yeah, screw you, you're going to take my funding away, which is a lot, in terms of getting to events, flying across the world to go to an event in Hong Kong, go to one in Tongyang in South Korea. It's not cheap to get to these things, and let alone compete and win, and for like prize money that is incomparable to what Premier League footballers earn in an afternoon, let alone, in a week or anything. And the fact that they're willing to get up and do that every day and train for that along with whatever else is going on in their lives is just incredible.
Yeah. Do you think it can only come from like you're pissed off at something? the world, yourself, like you've just got a fire. Like, as I say, everyone's experience of life is so different, but something happened to you. I mean, all these people are very honest about, with the David Goggins story or whatever. But it's like, it's just such a difficult thing to replicate. And would you want that mentality? Because if you had that mentality, it's probably because something pretty fucking bad happened to you earlier on in your life.
Do you not have, almost enjoy the test yourself moments, though? Like, I don't know about you, but when I have
I'm just talking about that, though, Ollie. Like, I'm not talking about me forcing myself to go for a 5K, being like, come on, don't be so lazy.
But it's not like that. I mean, so, for instance, when I get runs of work that are really intense, I remember back end of last October, I had a run of I think it was 12 football matches in 14 days. You're like, how am I going to fit this in? It's crazy times. I've got to get up and down the country for various things and stuff like that. And I almost relish can your body, mind, and skills hold up to that? And all they're doing is
pretty similar, mate.
But what they're doing, what they're doing is they're doing that on like a next level. But it's still
the Iron Man of football commentary.
But it's still that how much can I test myself? Stupid things like, playing. Some people say that playing 4 rounds of golf in a day is insane, and that's why people do it for like Macmillan cancer and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, could you do 100 holes of golf in a day, which would be more than 4 rounds? That would be even better to do 100. And I'd love to try and test myself and try and do that because it would be fun. It's something I love, and I'm willing to kind of put mind, body, and through that kind of thing. And they've got that same thing. It's just a next level of, I love doing triathlons. I love swimming, cycling, and running. And I'm just willing to see how far I can push my body. Because when you see these athletes come across the finish line, it's not like you see a sprinter and Noah Lyles is jumping around afterwards. Some of these guys and women just collapse and need medical attention straight away. They don't look like they need it when they're on the run, but as soon as they cross the finishing line, their body goes, now we're done. And it is, right, we need water, electrolytes, hydration, whatever. And they're willing to put themselves through that because the high of, I think, being at that level of endurance is like that endorphin release to them that just keeps them going and keeps them going. It's a fascinating mindset.
Anything else to wrap up, Mr. Wilson?
Well, there's the F1 quickly. Max Verstappen ended up with a 20-second penalty for a couple of shaky manoeuvres around when battling with Lando Norris around the Mexico City Grand Prix this weekend, which is fantastic because Max ends up finishing way down the order. Norris is able to capitalise on a mistake from Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari, who has a little wobble coming out of the final turn on one of the going onto the home straight and is able to overtake him around about midway through the race. And Norris ends up finishing second. But the star of the show this weekend was Carlos Sainz, who has been ditched by Ferrari at the end of this year. He's going to be moving to Williams, that are nowhere near in the same echelon in terms of the quality of their car right now to compete at the front end of the grid. And Carlos Sainz dominated the weekend, starting on pole, finishing the race on the top step of the podium and having a superb drive. And it was just really nice because he's one of the nicest guys in Formula One. His dad is the great racing driver, Carlos Sainz, who was a rally driver back in the day when it was like Colin McRae and Tommy Mäkinen, that kind of classic era of World Rally Championship. And so he's got that family lineage, that story. He's gone into motor racing. He's a great driver, but Ferrari have gone with Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc for next year. And it's kind of one of the last races of the season is a race that he controls from start to finish pretty much. Had a bit of an attack from Verstappen early on, but Verstappen got in his trouble with his 20-second time penalties. And we've got a world title race on our hands. We've got perhaps the first time that World Championship winning driver will win the Formula One world title with the team that finishes third in the Constructors' Championship, which is kind of interesting because I don't think that's happened since like Nelson Piquet back in the 70s, which is pretty wild. And you've got a good battle up at the top of Ferrari and McLaren now in the last few races fighting for that top spot in the Constructors' Championship. All the drivers and teams want their driver to win the World Championship, but in terms of money and reward at the end of the year, the Constructors' Championship is as big, if not bigger, for the teams as an entity. And so that's a really big finish going down to the wire in that, even if Norris can't get on Verstappen.
As part of my dedication, Ollie, to Not Another Sports Pod, I commit to you here and now to watch one of the Grand Prix in November, right? So which would you advise? You've got the Brazilian Grand Prix start of November, Las Vegas Grand Prix middle of November, and then the Qatar one end of November. What's the best one?
Brazil's a phenomenal track, classic racing circuit, home of Ayrton Senna, home of some really iconic moments in Formula One. It's where Lewis Hamilton won his first ever world title on the final corner, overtook Timo Glock to finish and pip Felipe Massa, a Brazilian, to the Formula One World Championship that year. It produced one of Hamilton's greatest ever races in 2021 when he went from the back of the grid in the sprint race to finish, I think it was third, and then he ended up winning the Grand Prix in a great battle with Max Verstappen as well. It's a wonderful circuit. It's one I'd love to tick off the bucket list. And just finally, last thing I want to mention is a American football player, Anthony Richardson, young quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. This weekend, they ran a couple of plays that basically ended up, he had to scramble a lot, run around, evade tackles, go down, and it gets to a third and I think it was 20-something, 23 yards. So you need 23 yards to get a fresh set of downs, keep the drive going in a really close game against a divisional rival. So it's quite important. And the quarterback is too tired as a professional athlete to run the play, and he takes himself off to the sideline. Never heard of that happening. The young, face of the team goes, really tired actually after doing those plays, so I'm going to go sit this one out. Just takes a play off.
All right, let me make the case for the defence. Obviously, we never know exactly what's going on here, right? So does tired mean, you have no idea what's going on with that man's body or mind?
He said he's tired. The coach said he was tired and didn't have the energy to run the play. Because
is there not an element of that's the ultimate act of selflessness to admit that you're not the best person to do this thing as part of a team unit?
I think I think it screams such a negative attitude. He's been a pretty decent player. He's had struggles this year, but last year he was out injured and they kind of missed him in his rookie year that started quite brightly. But it's one of those ones where if you're the leader of that team and as the quarterback and as the top draft pick that they picked him with, you are the face of that team and you can't just be like, I'm tired. Like, I'm not. Tom Brady doesn't step out in that moment. You know, there was a guy called Byron Leftwich who had a broken ankle, and his offensive lineman, after he'd thrown it, picked him up, carried him to where the ball was for the next play, got him down, and he continued to throw on a broken ankle because he wanted to stay in the game because he's the best guy to be in the game at that point. And if you're Anthony Richardson saying, I'm not going to be in the game, you're saying, at this point, even though I'm struggling, I think there's somebody better who can do that role better than me in this moment, as opposed to being the guy that goes, I'm struggling, but I'm a winner and going to do it. And like, we know American sports, they thrive off that sort of attitude and that mentality. It's that rallying cry. So, I don't know. Just never seen it before. Very weird.